Heading into this season, I expected a lot of talking points to form, as they always do, particularly coming off such a short break with so many question marks over teams that haven't played in months, and then teams that only played a couple of months ago. So there was a lot of question marks over the NBA this season, but one of the teams that I didn't have as many question marks over was the Toronto Raptors, and, well, there is some question marks over them now because they've started the season 0-3. There's just a few underlying concerns that seem to be popping their head up at every single turn. It's starting to get a little bit worrying, I'm not going to lie. I'm someone that's been a big advocate of the Raptors because I think they've been widely disrespected for a couple of years now as a team that had the second best record in the NBA last year. Not the second best record in a weak East, but the second best record in the NBA, ahead of teams like the Lakers, the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Celtics, all of these teams that everyone likes to put ahead of the Raptors. Yeah, they had a better record than all of those teams, but to start this year, well, they certainly don't have a better record than those teams, and they don't really have a better record than anyone, apart from the Pistons and Wizards. And that's a little concerning, and Raptors fans just aren't used to being in this situation, because you want to hear something crazy? Yeah, it's been 15 years. Well, since I was 100 centimeters tall, but it's also been 15 years since the Toronto Raptors started the season 0-3. Now, that's just give it a round of applause. 15 years since they started 0-3, that's just ridiculous. This organization deserves a lot of respect. And out of respect for this organization and this playing group, I'm not ready to say they're going to miss the playoffs like some people are saying, because I think it's been way too early. Obviously, all three of their games have come down to the wire, albeit not against the best teams in the Spurs and Pelicans, and then a good team in the 76ers. You would have expected them to win at least two of those games, I would have said, heading into the year. The reality is, a few things go differently, and they might be looking at a 2-1 or a 3-0 start. But you could say that about a number of teams. This league is so even. I mean, pretty much just to paint the picture, the Heat, the Bucks, and the Raptors are all out of the top 8 seeds. And you've got teams like the Hawks are emerging. All of these teams that would have been easy wins in the past are no longer easy wins, and that's going to lead to teams missing out on the playoffs that you didn't expect. Now, I'm not ready to say it's the Raptors. I don't know who it's going to be. That's the issue with the Raptors, and that's the issue with their slow start. But enough about that. What's the actual issue with this team? Because clearly something's gone wrong to the point where they've started as bad as they've started in over 15 years. And we have to start with the big boys. And, well, Joel Embiid's father and uncle have shipped off to LA. They've gone to the Lakers and Clippers respectively, and we saw that those two left a hole when trying to guard Embiid, and I was one who thought that maybe Baines could come in and replace what Gasol did, because towards the end of Gasol's tenure, he just wasn't the same player, but obviously his IQ defensively and offensively is just incredibly hard to replace. And then you've got Ibaka. I know he was going to be hard to replace, but I thought Boucher might come along to the point where it's maybe 70% of Ibaka, and maybe that's enough. It just doesn't look like it's enough. And we saw Embiid really had his way with Baines and Len, and like you would have expected, he has his way with most centers, but that's a big difference between having Gasol put the clamps on Embiid and having him absolutely dominate the game. That's the game in itself, right there. Now, I'm not willing to say Baines and Boucher can't fill it at some point in time, because you have to keep in mind, Ibaka and Gasol spent close to 2 years together. They had long playoff runs, and they built a rapport that can't be replaced overnight, and that's exactly what you are asking Baines and Boucher to do. Replace what they did overnight, because they had 2 weeks together. So it was always going to be a tricky way to start the season after having such an integral part of your team on offense and defense leave, and then try to replace it with someone who only gets a couple of weeks to work in and embed himself into that offense and defensive scheme. It's a recipe for a struggle, and that's exactly what we've seen to start the season. So I'll give him that. But there's a few other reasons why they've been struggling more than ever, and I need to talk about Malachi Flynn. Where is he? There's a clear need for added ball handling and playmaking. I thought that was the reason you drafted not only a point guard, but someone who is a mature point guard and seemingly ready to make an impact if preseason was anything to go by. Now, I'm not one to often question coaches' rotation decisions. I can see when they make a couple of errors on the floor, and obviously you can question that. But in terms of rotation decisions, a lot of things go into that we don't see outside of the 48 minutes on the court. We don't see what they do in practice, how they're performing in practice. We don't see how they're picking up cues in film study and their leadership, their ability to command an offense, which is what you're asking someone to do, whether they're a rookie or not. If they come in as a point guard, even as a backup point guard, you're asking him to command an offense, and that's a big ask. So I don't often question coaches, but at the same time, it's just clear that they have a lack of playmaking, and Flynn not getting any minutes, that's questionable, because it can't be any worse than what has happened when Kyle Lowry sits out, because when Kyle Lowry goes to the bench, Van Vliet tries to step up into that point guard position, and it's just not working. I mean, don't be deceived by his assist numbers. Van Vliet's a great player, he's a good shooter, he's a great defender, and he's a capable playmaker, but he's not someone who can run an offense, and it's very, very clear when Lowry goes to the bench and Van Vliet takes over. It's absolutely night and day, and that was the reason they lost against the 76ers, so why would you bring in a mature point guard that looked fantastic in preseason, who can play make, who can do everything that you're missing, and not play him? Like I said, there's things that go on behind the scenes that we don't see, but at the same time, it's just questionable from Nurse. I'll just say that. It is a little bit questionable. Now, another thing that I have to question from Nurse is his tendency to kind of leave these runs and let them escalate out of control. We saw it with the 76ers. They went on a 13-0 run, and I know he's got a lot of confidence in this team, and why wouldn't you, given what they've been through? But at the same time, sometimes you just need to get those guys to the bench, talk to them, run a play that you know is going to get you a bucket or create you a good opportunity, and at the very least, you're stopping the momentum of the other team. Letting it get to 13 points, that's pretty out of hand, if I do say so. And I think that's an issue that might need to be addressed, but the issues don't stop there, I'm afraid, Raptors fans. Another issue that popped its head up in the playoffs and was a big talking point of this team and was the reason they didn't make it through to the Eastern Conference Finals, it was Pascal Siakam and his half-court game, or lack of. It seems to be popping its head up again because he's struggled, and in particular in the fourth quarters. When you need someone to get you a bucket, he's not there. He's not the guy, because he's gone 1 of 9 in the last 2 fourth quarters, and overall over the first 3 games, his fourth quarter plus minus is at -20. Plus minus doesn't always tell the full picture, but 1 and 9, turning the ball over when you get double teamed, not being able to have a go-to shot that gets you a bucket in an isolation situation, that tells the full story. It is a bit concerning that he can't get that bucket when it's needed, and he just can't perform in the fourth quarter or to a degree in the half court at all. Just one more thing. I'm obviously not going to go through everything that's been the downfall of the Raptors to start the season. It'd be ridiculous to talk 20 minutes about a team's struggles when in 3 games' time they could be sitting at 500 and looking fine. But another thing, Norman Powell. Where is he? Is he okay? Yeah, has anyone heard from him? Has anyone seen him? He's gone missing. That's all I can say. He's gone missing. MIP candidate to a G League player with a green light. That's pretty much him. So, like I say with other players, like I said with Kelly Oubre, who turned things around last game. Of course against the Pistons, but he turned things around. It can't get any worse offensively. It can't. Well, if it does, then Matt Thomas and Malachi Flynn have to take some of his minutes. So he better hope it doesn't get worse, because otherwise he's going to be sitting out, because he just can't be performing this badly. It's absolutely woeful at the moment, and it's just hard to watch. So Norman Powell, you've gone from someone who was a key part of this team's success last year to, like I said, a G-Leaguer with the green light. So that's a little bit concerning. That's probably the last thing I'm going to talk about their concerns. Well, this is kind of a concern, but also a praise for Kyle Lowry, who doesn't get enough praise. When you talk about Damian Lillard, when you talk about Luka Doncic, all of these guys, Kyrie Irving, Kyle Lowry deserves to be in that conversation. I'm sorry, he just does. Maybe he's not as flashy as those guys. He doesn't have as many Instagram followers. He doesn't drop 50-point games as much. But in terms of what he does for this defense and offense, like you saw it in the 76ers game, when he sat out, this team was just a shell of themselves. The contrast between when he's on the floor conducting the offense and defense, mind me, talk about his defense. I always have to, because it's incredibly good and it's incredibly important for this team. The contrast is ridiculous, and it's unlike many other players in the league. That's why he's so good. And at 34, to be asking this much of him, for him to have played such huge minutes, and they're still losing games because they simply can't do anything when he sits, that's an issue, because he's eventually going to have to sit out games. He's 34 and he's come off very little rest over the last few years, and he's just going to have to reduce his minutes and reduce his playing time. If they can't win when he's playing this well and playing this often, you have to wonder, when can they win? If anything were to happen to him, God forbid, fingers crossed, this team is in serious trouble. That's when I would start to say this team isn't going to make the playoffs. If Kyle Lowry were to go down, it's a wrap. I'm sorry, no pun intended. I think Raptors fans know that as well. And that's no disrespect. It would be the same if Damian Lillard went down for Portland. They would be in all sorts of trouble as well. It's a credit to Lowry as a player, but it's also an issue for the Raptors. So they really need to try to sort out that secondary ball handler, because at the moment it's not about when he misses games altogether. It's about when he's off the floor for 10 minutes, which just can't happen. If you want to make the playoffs, you've got to be able to cope without your star player for 10 minutes at a time. And they didn't show any signs of doing that throughout the first 3 games of the season. I think one thing you have to consider with this Raptors team that isn't getting talked about enough: fatigue. We saw it with the Warriors last year. Sometimes it just catches up to you all at once. Now, I'm not expecting the Raptors to go 15-50 like the Warriors or whatever they went and end up with the second overall pick, although Raptors fans probably would be happy with that because it's a stacked draft, but I'm not expecting that. However, they've spent 2 years and they've played the most games over the last 2 years. Lowry, Van Vliet, Siakam have all got a lot of games into their body. It might catch up to them. And if it does, and if it shows signs of doing so, then that could lead to a down season. And that could lead to an unexpected missing of the playoffs, which I'm not giving up hope on yet. Another thing that we haven't even talked about, they're playing away from home. They're not even playing in Toronto. So there's just a lot of these things, these little details that sometimes you miss. I acknowledge I missed. That was something I didn't think about heading into this season. I always think about what players can do, not the little things. How about being away from home, not playing in Toronto, your home arena, knowing the rims better, knowing the courts better, not having as much rest over the last 2 years as any other team in the league, Kyle Lowry getting a year older. All of these things, they seem little in isolation, but when you add them all together, then they start to grow, and that's when your team starts the season 0-3. This isn't drastic measures for the Raptors yet, because obviously they've been in all 3 games, and they could be 3-0, they could be 2-1, but there is a few glaring issues with this team, none being more glaring than when Lowry sits out, because this team needs him. They need to find a way to work it out when he's not on the floor, and Malachi Flynn seems like the option to me, seems like the option to a lot of Raptors fans, and Nurse isn't really treating him that way, so maybe there's something wrong with him that we're missing. I don't know. It's just been a whole bunch of issues kind of come together at once that has led to an 0-3 start. Like I said, despite all of these issues and all of these problems, Norman Powell not being able to hit one shot, Pascal Siakam's troubles offensively, Baines and Boucher not really having any rapport together, all of these things, they've still been in all 3 games and they don't look terrible. They just look a notch down from last year. And if the Raptors do have a down year, what can you do? Let me know if you're concerned or you think they'll just turn things around like they always seem to do. I think there's a lot of issues, and another issue is my camera's gone blank now, so that'll be the end of the video. If you did enjoy, if you made it to the end, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Other than that, I'll catch you next time. Bye.